Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, tensions between Rwanda and Uganda ratchet up once again over Kigali's accusations that Kampala is helping rebel groups by letting them operate from Ugandan territory. Also, Senegal sticks to the familiar as President Macky Sall is re-elected for a second term. And across Africa, many traditional ways of marking key moments of life are disappearing. One group of women is painstakingly making its way across the continent, gathering documentation of rights native to dozens of countries. We take a closer look. But first, relations between Uganda and Rwanda took a turn for the worse on Tuesday, as Kigali accused its neighbour of supporting rebel groups trying to topple the Rwandan government. Relations soured last week after Rwanda blocked Ugandan trucks from crossing the border. Kampala's denied allowing RNC and FDLR rebels to operate from its territory. The two countries have a shared history that has alternated between friendly and hostile over the decades. Well, Rwanda leader Paul Kagame fought in a guerrilla war that brought Uganda's Yoweri Museveni to power in 1986. Grania Harrington joins us now with more. Grania, what are the latest developments to this fractious relationship between Uganda and Kampala? Uganda and Rwanda, excuse me.
So, as you say, there's been quite a serious escalation in this diplomatic row between the two countries, with high-level Rwandan officials accusing Uganda of harbouring and supporting rebels who are hostile to President Paul Kagame's government, and also of detaining and torturing and harassing Rwandans inside Uganda. Now, Uganda has denied all of these accusations, saying that anybody is free to come to Uganda and that nobody who is not a criminal has anything to fear in this country. But this border blockade is really a very clear step up in this diplomatic crisis. So the border blockade began last week with one of the border points being partially closed to freight. Now the three land borders in the southwest of Uganda between the two countries are effectively closed off, with Rwanda warning their citizens not to come to these countries, to Uganda rather. And it's always been quite an open border, so people will trade and study on both sides of these borders. They've been travelling back and forth with no problems at all for years, but now that has been partially shut down. At least there are a handful of people still going across, but there are trucks that are stuck on that border. So it's not just diplomatic now, this is also economic. Now, while Uganda denies all of the accusations against the country, this is still very obviously a deterioration in diplomatic relations between the two.
So diplomatic relations have been back and forth in terms of their quality over the decades. What's behind the ease with which Ugandan and Rwanda relations have been so easily strained? The two leaders used to be firm allies.
Absolutely. There has been a bit of back and forth, as you said, and there's been a bit of a history of a frosty relationship between the two over the past few years. But the two presidents did meet. President Paul Kagame and Yoweri Museveni met in Uganda last year, and that was seen as something of a warming of relations. They met, they spoke about security, they spoke about trade, and that was after a series of diplomatic snubs. So it was seen at the time that maybe things were warming up again. But it's very clear now that that is not the case, and the accusations being made against Uganda are very serious. Principal amongst them that Uganda has been harbouring and supporting rebels linked to a group called the RNC, which is based in South Africa, run by an exiled Rwandan general who is hostile to the government of President Paul Kagame. And also today, Uganda was accused of supporting the FDLR rebel group, which has been active for many years in eastern Congo and which is partly run by people who are said to be perpetrators of the Rwanda genocide. So those are very, very serious accusations, which Ugandan officials are denying. They're insisting that they're committed to regional integration and that they are working diplomatically behind the scenes to solve this crisis.
Thanks very much. Grania Harrington there for us in Kampala. Now, Senegal's President Macky Sall has officially won last month's election. On Tuesday, the Constitutional Court confirmed his re-election to a second term with 58% of votes. Runner-up Idrissa Seck won 21% of the vote and Ousmane Sonko 16%. Now, Sall's win was expected. His first mandate has seen the country's economic growth pass 6%, one of the highest on the continent. And voters appear to be keen for more.
Because of his rather discreet personality, Macky Sall surprised many in spring 2012 when he became Senegal's new leader.
I vow to serve faithfully in the role of President of the Republic of Senegal.
Before he was elected in 2012, this geologist from a modest and rural family had already served as mining and energy minister, interior minister, president of the National Assembly, and even prime minister. He grew as a politician in the shadow of Abdoulaye Wade, his mentor and Senegal's former president. They fell out in 2007 when Macky Sall, then head of parliament, raised questions about how Karim Wade, the president's son, was managing a government agency. Mr. Sall was gradually sidelined from power. In 2008, he created his own party, the Alliance for the Republic, and he toured the country, accusing his predecessor of bad governance. In 2012 and again in 2019, his campaign themes are economic and social development.
I am in favor of pursuing our plan for an emerging Senegal so young people can find more work, so women can be entrepreneurial and have all the support they need.
After 7 years in power, Senegal's fourth president no longer represents political renewal in the way he did when he ran as part of a large anti-Wade coalition in 2012. So for this campaign, Macky Sall highlighted his achievements and the need to continue implementing his program.
Thousands of Algerian students marched on Tuesday in protest at President Abdelaziz Bouteflika's participation in April elections. Rallies demanding that the 82-year-old resign have rocked the country since February 22nd. On Sunday, the ailing leader promised to quit early if he is re-elected, but many Algerians, weary of his two-decade rule, have been unmoved by the offer. Burundi's forced the UN to shut its local human rights office after 23 years. The government claims that it's made sufficient progress in human rights, so the station was no longer needed. However, the country continues to struggle with violent tensions caused by the re-election of President Pierre Nkurunziza to a controversial third term in 2015. Hundreds of people have been killed in clashes with security forces, and 500,000 people have fled abroad in unrest that followed. Bujumbura has since had a fractious relationship with human rights bodies. The UN's also said that there are still many credible reports of rights violations continuing to be carried out in the country, including murder and forced disappearances.
In October 2016, the government, in reaction to the report by the UN independent investigation in Burundi, suspended all cooperation with the office in Burundi. You will recall that this was an investigation that was established by the UN Human Rights Council here. We have very credible reports of human rights violations and abuses, including killings, forced disappearances, ill treatment, arbitrary arrests and detentions, threats and restrictions on the freedom of association, expression, and movement. These are ongoing allegations that we are receiving.
Well, centuries and even millennium-old traditions mark key moments of human life: birth, adulthood, courtship, marriage, and death. But across Africa, many traditions are disappearing. Well, 3 women, 2 photographers, and a tribal chief and artist have gathered footage, pictures, and material documenting glimpses of the heritage of 44 countries. Shirley Sitbin tells us more.
See these beautiful pictures? Angela Fisher and Carol Beckwith took 1 million of them. For over 4 decades, these Australian and American photographers traveled across 44 countries in Africa, filming thousands of hours of footage, collecting hundreds of precious artifacts, showing traditional rituals which are disappearing fast.
This record of Africa won't be taken again. It can't be taken again. 40% of it is already lost.
The photographers say rituals have changed or disappeared because the world has evolved. Here's one example.
In Niger, the desert is advancing at a very fast rate, and it's pushing the nomad population into agricultural areas where they're unwelcome. So they're either being forced to settle or being forced to move into areas that are alien to them, and they're losing their traditions.
But ancient rites are not doomed. The photographers and this artist they've worked with for decades believe they can be preserved and transmitted. Nigerian textile, for example.
Textile is dying off, and my own is to revive it and see whether one day the government will try to preserve it for us. So the young generation coming will be able to have a story on their textile.
The photographers are now searching for a museum to take in their collection and help preserve African heritage.
Wow, some amazing outfits in that report. Well, that's it, though, for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us. Do so again if you can. Take care.